In a small island in the offshores of San Francisco lies the prison of Alcatraz, America's highest security prison. Throughout its history, 148 prisoners have attempted to escape from this highly fortified prison and failed until 1962, when the sudden, mysterious disappearance of 3 inmates shook the entire federal police of the U.S. In today's video, we will tell you about Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin, the only Alcatraz prisoners who managed to disappear from America's most secure prison without arousing any suspicion. Did they really get their freedom? Or death caught up with them in doing so? The reason this prison escape is so famous lies in the popularity of the Alcatraz being the most fortified prison in the U.S. Alcatraz Island, which is also known as The Rock, stands as a chilling monument in the San Francisco Bay. From 1934 to 1963, it served as a federal penitentiary and housed some of the most notorious criminals in American history. With countless armed guards, multiple watchtowers, fortified walls, and Pacific Ocean in the surroundings, this prison is designed to be inescapable. In a prison as airtight as this, how did 3 inmates plan, execute, and survive an escape plan? Let's find out. It was the morning of June 12, 1962, in Alcatraz. According to the prison's rules, the inmates' roll call was scheduled at exactly 7 a.m. for breakfast. The roll call was called that day too, but the guards were surprised when they realized that 3 inmates did not respond to the call. Those inmates were Frank Morris, Clarence Anglin, and John Anglin. A guard was sent down to their cells to check up on them. As the guards reached their cells, he found each of them lying on their beds, sleeping upon the morning call, and decided to wake them up individually. However, what was yet to come stunned the guard. He didn't know he was about to experience the strangest event of his duty at Alcatraz. The first cell he checked was of Frank Morris. Approaching his bed as he tapped him on his head to wake him up, the head fell off the body. The guard was astonished and couldn't believe what his eyes witnessed. His first instinct was assuming that someone decapitated Frank Morris and left him dead. However, the longer he kept on looking at the head in disbelief, he realized it wasn't a real head. It was a wonder of art made of papier-mâché. He rushed to check on the other 2 inmates and found 2 more paper-made mache heads left behind. 3 prisoners had escaped and the guards had no idea how it happened. Alcatraz was sealed immediately, and the authorities were informed. This created an atmosphere of chaos, with search teams sent everywhere. The investigation started quickly. The guards were checking every prisoner and each cell thoroughly. This led to the discovery of the 4th member, Alan West, who was in possession of a fake papier-mâché head. Upon investigating his cell, they found a half-dug tunnel under his sink. Alan, upon getting caught, did not agree to talk to the police at all. However, once the police negotiated with him on getting leniency with his punishment, he agreed to give them the details of the escape. According to Alan West, he was a co-conspirator in the escape plan. He admitted his discussion with the escaped cellmates and himself being part of it, but due to his failure on escaping at the right time, he accepted his fate at Alcatraz and decided to stay behind. The officers of Alcatraz were furious by the escape, but even more shocked when they realized that for almost 10 hours, they did not even consider the possibility of a prison escape. Before we delve into the escape story any further, it is important to know that this escape came out as a surprise to even historians and security experts. As we mentioned earlier, the Alcatraz prison is known as The Rock, due to the airtight security it offers. Therefore, it was strangely odd that the super-secure prison of America had loopholes that went unnoticed until 3 inmates decided to take leverage for their freedom. As per the historians, different prisoners have tried to escape from Alcatraz on different occasions, but no one managed to succeed before. It's not just the jail that makes the escape impossible. It's the 6 watchtowers and a 20-foot fence with a barbed wire above the high-end walls that makes it impossible for anyone to escape through without getting caught. Even if the ball is in your court and you manage to escape the prison, the horrifying dark blue Pacific Ocean that scares even the prison guards at San Francisco Bay welcomes you. So, it was highly unlikely that 3 inmates would pull off a prison escape without getting into trouble. The main characters of this incident, Clarence William Anglin, John William Anglin, Alan West, and Frank Morris, had a long history of crimes. Some of them even stepped into the world of crime in their pre-adolescent age. The Anglins were brothers by blood, and they were in their mid-30s when they joined other prisoners in this federal jail for a case of bank robbery. Clarence was the elder one, and more wanted for his excessive robbery attempts and police reports. John, too, was held for a bank robbery case, but not too much of his criminal record was found out later. Alan West, who was 33 at the time of escape, was serving jail time since the age of 14 and jumped from one federal prison to another. He had been in jail several times and tried to escape on multiple occasions but failed, and was then sent to the Alcatraz because it was nearly impossible to escape from the airtight security here. The fourth and final member of this plan was Frank Morris, who was abandoned at an orphanage at a young age. After a while, he escaped from the orphanage and had been going to jail since the age of 13. Frank, often called as the Houdini of prison, also tried to escape jail several times, more famously at his attempt in Texas jail in 1940. He, exactly like the Anglin brothers, was sent to Alcatraz due to a bank robbery case. The incident only counts for 3 members of the plan, Clarence Anglin, John Anglin, and Frank Morris, but were significantly assisted by the 4th inmate and ally of the plan, Alan West, who, however, failed to escape from the jail on the day. This brings us to a question. How did the inmates plan this grand escape without arousing any suspicion among the security? The federal jails, particularly the Alcatraz prison, is often hostile for new members, and the prison guards are deliberately strict and keep the members separated. The inmates themselves are not welcoming of new members. The alliances inside and hostility is common, and it is difficult for members to develop trust in each other. The members of the prison break had to spend several hours together before they got along with each other. They needed delicate planning and meticulous details of escape. Then how did these 3 inmates manage to avoid all that and execute a successful prison escape? Well, for the Anglin brothers, it was easy. They had common self-interest and a lifelong journey spent together. With Frank Morris and Alan West, it did take time to develop trust in each other. In the end, the desperation to escape the worst of worst jail led to one thing and another until they found themselves outside of the prison. A more detailed explanation was given by West himself. According to the investigation with Alan West, he calls himself the mastermind of the plan. He informed the investigators of their cells being too far and their furious attempt on having their cells as close to each other as possible. To make the escape possible, they needed their cells to be in Block B, and fortunate luck and little effort led their cells to be shifted to that block. In West's own words, the prison offered very little features to inmates, but right below the sink was the air vent responsible for ventilation. Because of the deteriorating facilities at the Alcatraz and the saltwater of the island, the concrete around the vent was not so concrete anymore. The inmates saw this as an opportunity to plan an escape and started gathering saw blades, metal spoons, and anything that could help them scrape that concrete away. They also obtained the motor from a vacuum cleaner and fashioned an electric drill out of it. By using these tools, they started shoving the concrete around the vent, making way for a person to go through. They worked at night, standing guard for each other, and devised a way to cover up their handiwork. Of course, they could not simply leave the holes open for prison guards to see. So, West, who previously worked at the staff, came up with an easier way to hide. The prisoners made cardboard-designed air vents and painted them to put in front of the ventilation gap each day. For prison guards, it was nearly impossible to detect what was going on with the vent. On a normal day, a 9 feet far away glimpse of the entire cell could not spot the difference. So the vent went unnoticed. To disguise it even further, they started roaming the stuff around their room and messed up the entire look of the room. This way, even the guards who would come to check up on the inmates every hour could not notice anything strange. The first experiment did not take long. Once the vent hole was wide enough for a man to pass through, the Anglins and Morris followed West's guidance and went through the air vent into the main pipelines. These pipelines took them to the rooftop of the prison building. A feeling of happiness surged through them as they took a whiff of fresh air. However, they immediately found the roof to be inescapable. There was no way out the roof that could take them away from this prison, except for a bakery smoke chimney. The escape plan needed more refining and required suitable time for a perfect, flawless execution. They realized they had to wait for weeks or even months before any further attempt to escape the prison. This was far more time-consuming than they thought, and with guards around them, the execution became even more challenging. At this point, the inmates had to find a way to deceive the guards. They designed 3 papier-mâché heads to trick the guards and snuck out of their cells whenever they got a chance. The guards would believe that the prisoners were sleeping in their cells, while they would go around and see the feasibility of the escape. The dummy heads could be fashioned out of anything prisoners could get their hands on. These papier-mâché heads were also made from cement to make the structure even more firm. What became the problem for inmates was the structure apparently looked too fake. Hence, to make it seem even more realistic, they stole hair clippings from the barber shop and pasted them on the top of the dummy heads. The fake heads gave them enough time to escape the jail, but this only counts for half the attempt. The issue of crossing the Pacific Ocean was a bigger problem. The prisoners set up a workshop on the roof of their cells where they would dump everything that they could get their hands on. This stolen and gathered stuff also included over 50 raincoats. They worked on their escape plan day and night and turned those prison rain jackets into an inflatable raft and several life preservers. The experts, as they look back, have jaw-dropping expressions as they look through this plan. Not only did they turn the prison jackets into rafts, but also came up with waterproof glue that would keep them stuck together even in the ocean. They also fashioned the paddles through wood scraps and plywood they found around the prison. Along with that, they stole a concertina and used it as a form of bellows to inflate this makeshift raft. Once the preparations were over and the raft was ready, it was time for them to apply the plan. The smoke chimney was shut tight with bolts the first time they found it. However, over time, they managed to open it and fashioned a fake screw out of soap to keep it temporarily shut. On the night of their escape, 3 out of the 4 inmates were ready to escape from Alcatraz. West did not have his ventilator grill removed, and hence, he had to stay behind. The brothers and Morris placed their fake heads on the beds, climbed up the pipeline to the roof, shimmied down the smoke chimney, climbed over the fence and ran towards the northeast shore. With approximate investigations, around 10 p.m. at night, they launched their makeshift raft into the treacherous water of San Francisco Bay, never to be seen again. The next day, the biggest question among the guards, the inmates, the CIA, and even later in the public was, did they make it out successfully? The Federal Bureau Investigation, FBI, was called in to launch an investigation. Their best source was still in Alcatraz, Alan West, who confessed his ties with escapees and was potentially their only source of information to conduct the investigation further. West, however, confused the investigators with his information. The FBI investigators could not comprehend the idea that instead of traveling 1 mile in the deadly sea towards San Francisco, they would travel twice the route in the north towards Angel Island. The strangeness of this idea was self-explanatory, because the inmates would try to escape as soon as possible before any Coast Guard caught them. Their decision, however, made sense in some way. Traveling to San Francisco was full of risks, as there was a high chance of being recognized in such an urban and highly populated area. Cherry on top were their prison uniforms. Any civilian who came across them would instantly recognize them as prisoners and get them arrested again. On the other hand, the Angel Island at that time was home to a missile base that was being decommissioned and could eventually be more advantageous for the 3 wanted men. Similarly, the population of Angel Island was a bit too low. There was also a chance that they might find any left-out boats which could be used to escape their way. From Angel Island, West told the police that the escapees intended to travel to Marin's Island, where they were planning to steal a car. As the investigation continued, the investigators found out about a crucial clue that could line up to the testimony of Alan West. They found paper bags, which contained the material that the inmates held. The most prominent were the photographs of the Anglin family members and a makeshift wooden paddle exactly as Alan described. At this point, it was impossible to tell if the prisoners had made it out or not. So the investigators led to two conclusions. The first was that their journey to escape failed, and they drowned in the water. The photographs and other information was considered too important for them to leave behind, and potentially was one explanation of their failure to reach. The second, however, seemed as another mode of deception by the escapees, that they intentionally left these behind, since it was easier to move around without these paper bags. The second explanation was seen as far more plausible because even after many days, neither did they find any dead body around, nor did any dead body float around the water. The case failed to come to conclusion, and after 17 years, it was officially closed in 1979 by the FBI. The case was handed over to the U.S. Marshals in case any new leads of the case come up, and could therefore be reopened. The case remained dormant till 2003, for about 41 years since the incident. In 2003, the U.S. General Michael Dyke decided to poke around the case in hopes of getting his hands on something which previously managed to fool the eyes of the agencies. He was looking for any leads that were not previously discovered or seen. As he looked into the government documents, he found compelling evidence. In his search into the Marin County Police report in the 1960s, he found a reported stolen blue Chevy on the date of their escape. What was even more shocking for Dyke was the eyewitnesses' statement. They saw 3 suspicious men inside the vehicle. At the time, the escape was kept hidden from the public and was probably an unclassified case for the CIA and the FBI. Dyke found another police report in California, which is almost 100 miles east of the county. There, a man reported he saw a blue Chevy driven by 3 men. This evidence certainly raised some eyebrows as he connected the dots. One thing led to another, and Dyke concluded that the probability of this blue Chevy being driven by a prison escapee is pretty high. In addition to that, if this is true, then everything Alan told was true. They escaped to Angel Island, went to Marin Island, and stole a car to escape. However, the 40-year-old information could not get to anything. Even if all was true and factual, there was no way to trace the prisoners. To this day, the escapees are never caught. The question of their escape and survival still intrigues many. If the prisoners managed to survive, what are their whereabouts now? Michael Dyke, in an interview with Inside Edition, claimed to have found the picture of these 3 and concluded them to be very similar. However, he was unsure of their current whereabouts. The case was once again reopened in 2013 with a letter from John Anglin, who was supposedly sending this to his family. In the letter, he mentioned his escape and ensured his safety. Another picture of Anglin brothers working as farmers in Brazil was found. The similarity was striking, but nothing could have come out of that either. However, no definite conclusion could be made. Dyke remains skeptical about their survival to this day. He claims to have studied every possible evidence and believes that even if they survived their escape, they would no longer be alive. But whether the 3 prisoners survived the escape is not the real question here. The question is the ignorance of the prison security in the most fortified place. It is hard to determine whether the inmates were too smart to be caught or the guards were too naive to be easily deceived. But the fact remains that the security system might need more than the fortified walls. It needs vigilant minds and watchful eyes to see what others cannot. This brings us to the end of our story. Based on the evidence and speculations, what do you think of the escape and the prisoner's possibility of surviving? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked this video, tap on the thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more. Until the next story, stay curious.